Hey, people of planet Earth. We're about a month away from Bethesda's big Starfield showcase in June, so I figured I should make another video on the game, and give some more predictions since there are plenty of topics I didn't cover or didn't go into enough detail on in my previous two videos. I've been asked what I think the minimum and recommended specs for the game will be, and I think that will be fun to speculate about. First off, when it comes to storage, I predict Starfield's installation size will be well over 100 gigabytes, and it could be more like 150 or 200 once all the DLC and Creation Club crap comes out. The game will have tons of dialogue, tons of high-poly models, loads of animation data, and most importantly, it will have thousands upon thousands of high-res textures bloating up that file size immensely. I doubt the game will fail to launch on a mechanical hard drive, but unless you want to see 5-minute loading times, frequent stuttering, and textures taking ages to pop in, you will need an SSD. I wouldn't recommend playing Fallout 4 off of a hard drive, and Starfield is practically guaranteed to be even more storage intensive. Even a cheap SSD with a 1.5 gigabytes per second read speed will be 10 times faster than any hard drive, and it's going to make the experience way more tolerable. But it's important to note that load times and stuttering will also depend heavily on your CPU. Now, technically any CPU that supports the required instruction sets will be able to open the game. Fallout 4 actually works on some of the later Pentium 4 CPUs, albeit with ridiculous load time, stuttering, and a sub-20 frame rate. Even if Starfield requires the AVX instruction set, you'll still be able to open the game on CPUs that are over a decade old. But for a playable, 30+ all-the-time experience, I think you'll need at least a quad-core CPU from within the past 6 or 7 years. And for 60 FPS all the time, well, I'm not optimistic that it will even be possible. I believe that looking to the past is the best way of predicting what will happen in the future, and it's a fact that every single Bethesda game ever released has been impossible to run at a locked 60 FPS with the highest settings on existing hardware at the time of its release. The Core 2 Duo CPUs of the era could not deliver 60 FPS in Oblivion or Fallout 3, and even a Sandy Bridge i7 cannot guarantee 60 FPS in the original Skyrim. And even with the expensive i7 6700K in 2015, you wouldn't have been able to hit 60 FPS in downtown Boston at all times. Now, if you're willing to run Starfield at more compromised settings, lowering the render distance in particular, CPU-limited performance will be better, but with top-of-the-line hardware, that shouldn't be necessary. There are PC games like Doom Eternal that look great and have excellent optimization, allowing those with the right hardware to pump out hundreds of frames per second. But, especially recently, we're seeing a lot of PC ports that can't run at a solid 60 no matter what CPU you have. A lot of these duds are Unreal Engine 4 games, but let me tell you, the Creation Engine isn't any better. Historically, it's had the same poor multi-threading and traversal stutter issues. Bethesda games can also be ridiculously draw-call bound in certain scenarios. In Starfield, it's possible that cities or dense jungles will drop performance like a rock. Maybe the DirectX 12 API will be a saving grace or at least a mitigating factor here, and maybe the engine has been upgraded to allow for better multi-threading. But let's be realistic. If their previous games all had massive performance issues but sold like hotcakes anyways, what incentive does Bethesda have to get performance right this time? Anyways, when it comes to GPU requirements, if you're willing to play the game at 800 by 600 resolution at 20 FPS, any GPU from the past decade will do the job, as long as it supports DirectX 12. For a reasonable 1080p 60 FPS experience, I would hope that the RTX 3060 can handle the game at the max settings and maybe push to 1440p with upscaling, but you never know. Starfield might have some super GPU-intensive effects like the God rays from Fallout 4. You'll probably also need at least 12 gigs of decently fast RAM to prevent the game from stuttering and swapping to the page file. Overall, if you just want to play Starfield, buying an Xbox Series console will likely be the cheapest path to get you there. You are not going to get a PC with anywhere close to the gaming power of an Xbox Series X for the same price. And since Starfield will likely have modding support on console, there is not really an advantage to staying on the PC platform for the average user. On that note, I really hope that Starfield won't have any stupid mod size limits on Xbox. The 5GB partition reserved for mods in Skyrim Special Edition is not nearly enough, and Fallout 4's 2 GB limit is even more pathetic. If there is going to be a limit, it should be something reasonable like 25 GB. Anyhow, let me bring attention to something interesting I noticed when rewatching the reveal trailer. Look at this shot. Notice that there is no obvious gateway that could be used as a loading transition point into the city. It's possible that Starfield could have open cities that are connected to the rest of the planet without the need for a loading screen. That would be excellent. The fewer loading screens, the better as far as I'm concerned. They are a constant annoyance. And you want to know what else is a constant annoyance that I hope won't appear in Starfield? The terrible previs and precombines setup Fallout 4 has. Precombines turned the game into a horror show, not only for modders, but the devs themselves, to be frank. Do you know why you can only build settlements at certain predefined areas in Fallout 4? It's because the rest of the Commonwealth is full of precombined objects that you wouldn't be able to scrap in workshop mode. If you shift a rock 1 inch in the Fallout 4 creation kit, congratulations, you just ruined performance in an entire cell. In Skyrim, you can move or delete whatever you want with no performance impact. That's why Skyrim has tons of quest mods that add new dungeons to the game, while Fallout 4 has comparatively almost none. No one wants to deal with the headache these systems cause. They need to be dumped into the trash bin of bad ideas and left there forever. In Starfield, it should be possible to clear-cut forests, uproot rocks, and build outposts wherever we want. I want everything except the terrain itself to be modifiable. It would also be great if settlement objects had LOD models so you can actually see them from a faraway distance. That's another reason you can't build where you want in Fallout 4. All of these settlement areas were conveniently placed in regions that can't be seen from very far away to minimize the inevitable pop-in issue caused by the lack of LODs. Another thing I'd like to see more of in Starfield is destructible environments. Not on a massive scale, of course. It's unreasonable to expect entire buildings to break apart. I'm talking more about micro-destruction. Glass bottles should shatter when shot, wooden crates should break apart, and gas canisters should explode instead of flying around like basic physics objects. This might help balance explosive weapons, which could be super powerful but also run the risk of destroying some precious loot. It sounds like a good idea to me, and wouldn't really be that difficult to implement. I would also love to see every light be destructible. It really annoyed me that you can destroy searchlights in Fallout 4, but all other lights are insusceptible to damage. What's the point of having a dynamic lighting engine if you're not going to show it off? Something I didn't talk about before because it wasn't released yet is the Australian Censorship Board's classification of Starfield as R18+. Interestingly, not because of violence, but rather drug use. Fallout 4 is full of drugs, but it only received a moderate impact score, while Starfield is receiving a high impact score. This could mean that drugs will play a larger role in Starfield, or perhaps the game has drugs named after real-world ones, or maybe there are usage animations the board thought were too realistic. Another interesting fact is that both Fallout 4 and Starfield have a strong impact violence score, which could point to Starfield having the same limb dismemberment and gore systems as Fallout 4, which would be incredible. I'd love to see some gore in Starfield. Then again, I wouldn't put too much stock in these ratings, since they are complete arbitrary bullshit cooked up by the most hate-filled pricks the Australian government could find. It could very well be that Starfield has even less gore than Skyrim, but they gave it a strong impact rating because you can leave footprints in blood pools or something silly like that. The ESRB rating accidentally leaked just a few days ago as well, and it does not mention gore or intense violence, only violence and blood. That's not a good sign for those pining for a decent gore system. Not adding gore will make it easier for the devs to add new clothing and armor sets, so they probably don't want to add it. I hope gore will make it in, but if it doesn't, hey, at least YouTube videos about Starfield won't be demonetized, so from a self-serving perspective, it's good, kind of. At the bottom of the list, Fallout 4 has a moderate impact score for sex, and Starfield has a none score. So even the fade to black implied sex scenes from the Fallout games aren't going to be in Starfield. It'll just be a completely lonely, sterile, sexless experience. And who says video games aren't becoming more realistic? Alright, let's move on from drugs, violence, and sex and talk about another contentious issue, AI. There's been a lot of talk about AI reshaping the gaming industry recently, but I don't think AI is going to have much of an impact on Starfield unless something is being done with it at the 11th hour. Nearly all of Starfield's development happened before the current AI craze. Starfield's direction has been shaped by decisions made as far back as 2016. It is a captivating idea, saying whatever you want to an NPC and having them come up with a response on the fly based on their personality, but it's still very early days for this technology. Maybe by the time The Elder Scrolls 6 rolls around, it will be mature enough to use in a AAA video game. A problem that will need to be solved, though, is the computational cost of generative AI. I'm worried that AI integration will become yet another excuse for single-player games to be made always online, because you'll have to connect to a massive server to generate AI responses, and eventually one day the server will shut down and it'll be game over. I don't want that to happen to Fallout 5 and the next Elder Scrolls. On that somber note, I have to end this video. I thought it was going to be a little longer, but I've run out of time and run out of things to say, really. So until next time, toodles!